Hello everyone, I am Heather. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you enjoy travel content, be sure you're subscribed to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the 5 best and the 5 worst things from our June 2021 vacation. All right, first I'm going to share the 5 best things from our vacation. These are the things that we enjoyed the most from this trip. When I get to the 5 worst things, I'm also going to share with you the lessons that we learned or how we plan to improve upon that situation in future travels. So be sure you stay for the whole video. If you haven't been following along with our vlogs from our June 2021 trip, we went to Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Williamsburg, Virginia, and the Outer Banks in North Carolina. I will link the entire playlist from that trip at the end of this video. Let's go through the 5 best things from our trip that we enjoyed the most. The first thing was our evening tour of the monuments in Washington, D.C. This was a really great way to see the monuments in Washington, D.C. The lighting was terrific. It was really neat to be doing the tour like through sunset and into the evening, and then once all the lights turned on. It was a great way to introduce my kids to Washington, D.C. Neither Megan nor Ben had ever been there before. I have seen the monuments in Washington, D.C. many times, but I had never done a tour like this where I got to see a whole bunch of them all at once, and I had never done it at night before. And I have to say that this is probably my favorite way that I've seen the monuments of Washington, D.C. I highly recommend it. We went through D.C. signature tours, and both the tour guide and the bus driver were terrific. They did a great job. As I talked about in that video, they even went out of their way to pick us up and drop us back off at our hotel, which was greatly appreciated. And it was a really good tour for me, given the fact that I'm still recovering from a very serious ankle injury and can't really walk much, because they dropped us off very close to each monument and we never had to walk very far. Megan especially said that she really enjoyed the tour. I think both kids did. They found Tyrone, our tour guide's stories and commentary, very interesting and entertaining, and it was really great for them to get to see the monuments up close. All right, the second best thing that we really enjoyed from our trip was going to the beach. At the time we went on that trip, we had not seen the ocean in almost 3 years. The last time we had seen the ocean was when we went on our cruise on Royal Caribbean's Mariner of the Seas in August of 2018 over my birthday. And we had not been to the ocean since. We had been to the Great Lakes a couple times, and if you've ever been to the Great Lakes really are huge inland seas, and they're a lot like the ocean. But we hadn't been to the actual ocean since then, and we were really missing it. And also, my kids had never really had the opportunity before to do what we did that day, which was just walk along the beach and wade in the waves and look at the shells and the wildlife on the beach and things like that. One thing I'd really like to do with my kids is take them to like Cannon Beach, Oregon, where they have really great tide pools. Andrew's been there, but Megan and Ben haven't. So just the experience of being on the beach and, in and out of the water and looking at crabs and, things like that was really cool for them and something that we really enjoyed. And bonus, it was free. Okay, our third best thing from our trip was going to Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Wearing my Busch Gardens shirt today. We had a fantastic day at Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. This was my second time visiting Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. I also went with my dad, my then husband, my son Andrew, who at the time was like 7 or 8, and Megan was a baby the last time we were there. And I didn't remember it very well at all. I remembered like little snippets when we were there. We really enjoyed this visit. It was a beautiful day. The weather was fantastic. It wasn't very crowded because of the limited capacity during the pandemic. The only place we really had any kind of an issue with waiting at all was actually in the car waiting to get into the parking lot. The lines to get on rides weren't bad at all. I don't think we ever waited more than like 10-15 minutes at the most. The landscaping and the atmosphere of that park and the theming there is just so cool. It's just beautiful. And we just had a really enjoyable, fun day at Busch Gardens and had a really good time. Okay, the fourth thing that was a best on our trip was visiting the National Aquarium in Baltimore, Maryland. The National Aquarium is right down on the water in the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. It's a beautifully designed aquarium. It's one of the biggest aquariums, I think, in the United States. And I have to say, from my experience of visiting aquariums so far, this is the best aquarium I've ever been to. It was just really neat and really well designed and had a lot of great stuff to look at. It was pretty crowded. We were there on a Saturday, and there were some spaces where it could get a little bit hard to get close to some of the exhibits because there were so many people, but masks were very strictly required. And so we felt pretty comfortable because everybody was required to wear masks and they were enforcing it. It's just a really neat location for the aquarium, and the aquarium itself inside is really a high quality aquarium, and we really enjoyed our experience there. And then our fifth best thing about this trip was I loved our rental car. We had a brand new, I think 2021 Toyota Corolla. It was blue. It was a very modern, smooth, quiet, high efficiency car. It was very comfortable and easy to drive. It was comfortable for the kids. It had really cool features on the dash that I have never had before that I really liked. And it got incredibly good gas mileage. So I really enjoyed our rental car. And that seems like a strange thing to add to this list, but it was a big positive for me on this trip, especially because the number one thing on my 5 worst things from this trip was traffic. Traffic and driving out there was horrible. And when I put this on Facebook when I came back, my friends were like, oh yeah, it's like driving in the cities. No. The worst traffic in the Twin Cities, times that by like 50. It was so bad. I mean, I've seen bad traffic in my life. I guess the thing that really struck me was how long it would go on for. It was just endless bad traffic. It was just heavy traffic for hours. And if you have to be, I mean, it's hard enough when you have to be driving in traffic for a little while, a half an hour or even, an hour. But I mean, it would be like 6, 7, 8 hours of horrible heavy traffic. And if you've been following along with my ankle injury, it's my right ankle that I still have a lot of pain. And the 3 things that are still very, very hard for me are going downstairs, not up. I can go up fine. Down is really difficult. I can't walk fast, and I can't walk any extended distance. It swells back up and is just really, really painful. It actually still hurts right now. Megan and I took a walk last night, a nice slow walk, and it swelled up and got really painful, and it still hurts now. And driving. And particularly the thing about driving itself is okay. It's having to hold the brake. Holding the brake down and that pressure of having to push with my foot is really, really painful. And having to do that for hours and hours and hours in heavy traffic and stop and go was awful for my ankle. And it was really miserable. And I also felt very, very tense because I'm so nervous about getting rear-ended. We actually did get rear-ended in heavy traffic in our trip to Chicago in March on the day we were driving home by some guy from Pennsylvania. And there was literally nothing we could do. He rear-ended us pretty hard. There was no visible damage to either car, and he gave me the thumbs up and kept going. But there was no way we could stop. There was no way we could pull over. It was pretty jarring to us. And I was mad because I'm like, dude, pay attention. And I guess the thing that really bothers me, I've been rear-ended 3-4 times in my life. And one time I was rear-ended so bad at a stoplight. I was stopped at a stoplight and somebody really plowed into the back of me. And I'm still very anxious because of that. I had a pretty severe neck injury and had to go to physical therapy for months. And so I'm really tense about people driving too close behind me and not paying attention and not leaving enough of a cushion between cars. And this was a real problem out in that area around DC and Baltimore and Virginia and everything. It was really bad. People were in your trunk all the time. They were very bad about tailgating, and it just made me really tense and really nervous. And the fact that I was in a rental car made me more nervous because I obviously didn't want anything to happen to the car either. The other thing that I found, and I'm sure it's not everyone, but I definitely noticed it, and it was really kind of upsetting. And maybe this is just a difference between out there and the Midwest. Everybody in the Midwest, I mean, even in Chicago, when people drive kind of crazy and don't use their blinker, I still feel like it's not as bad as it was out there. Everybody we met and talked to, I should say, on this whole trip was very, very nice and very lovely. You would not know that by the way they drive. They were so rude. They were such rude drivers. I've never gotten honked at so much in my life. And I mean, not just like beep, but like beep, 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 beep. People flashing their lights at me. People driving, weaving in and out of traffic, going like 80, 90 miles an hour. And this was not like a one-time thing. This was like all the time. People driving like that. People weaving in and out of traffic, people blaring on their horns, people flashing their lights, driving right up to the back of you, not stopping until the very last second, until they're basically like in your back seat. It was just a constant all the time thing. It makes me just stressed even now just thinking about it. It was awful. And everywhere we went, it was like that. It was especially bad on 95. Interstate 95 was really bad, and there was a lot of construction. And I did actually get off 95, both going and coming back, to avoid it because it was so bad. And I mean, when you look at Google Maps, pretty much anytime, you will see that whole section from like south of Washington, D.C. to what, I don't really know, all the way up like just past New York City into Connecticut is basically just solid red all the time. So, I mean, that whole corridor there is just really, really heavy traffic anyway all the time. But then when you add in the behavior of other drivers, it just made it really unpleasant for me. And that combined with the pain in my ankle and having to brake so much, it was just very, very negative. It was hard not to separate that from the rest of the trip. And I will admit now, the lesson I learned from this, well, it's two things. Number one, I really don't want to drive when I'm traveling. I have come to like driving less and less as I've gotten older. And a lot of that is since I have kids, I'm just a lot more tense and nervous and anxious when I have my kids in the car because I don't want anything to happen to them. I don't want anything to happen to me either, but I really don't want anything to happen to them. The other thing is, especially since I hurt my ankle, driving for me is not fun. It's painful. And so I don't want to do it if I can help it. So the one lesson I learned is I really would rather go on vacations where I don't have to do any driving. Unfortunately, there's a lot of places you can't get to unless you drive or take a car. And so that's a bummer. I don't really know the way around that. And we are going to have to drive again on our next trip that we're going to be taking probably before this video comes out. But that's one lesson I learned. Another lesson I learned is I definitely included too much driving in this particular trip. I tried to include too many different places to go on this trip. And so it involved a lot of driving. And that was just not a good thing. I mean, there's some things though, like there's no way, a couple of these destinations, there's no way to get there without a lot of driving. There's no way to get to Williamsburg, Virginia without driving for at least a couple hours from the nearest airport. There's no way to get to the Outer Banks in North Carolina without a significant amount of driving from any airport. I mean, unless you're flying into some really small, weird little tiny local airport, which I don't even know how you would do that in most cases, there's a lot of driving involved to get to these destinations. And so I guess I might in the future avoid destinations like that where there's a lot of driving involved to get there and stick to things that I don't have to drive. The one other thing I wanted to say about this to kind of give you an idea of how bad the traffic was, every place we went basically when we had to drive from place to place, the time that it should have taken to get there and the time it actually took to get there were never even close. And the thing that really frustrated us was when we would start driving, it would say, okay, it's going to take 3 hours and 40 minutes. The more you drove, the longer the time got. Like it didn't go down. You would have been driving for 2 hours and the total time until your destination kept getting bigger. So it was like you were driving backwards. Not only had you already driven all this time in this heavy traffic, but the time to get to your destination kept getting longer. And I can only assume that the reason for that was because the traffic kept getting heavier and heavier as the day went on. It was awful. It was maddening. I absolutely hated the driving on this trip. That was by far the worst thing about the trip. Okay, the second thing about our trip that we didn't like, and that I definitely am going to fix and already have in a couple cases, is having really late flights. Late flights that leave late in the day and you get to the destination very, very late at night. Both of our flights on this trip, both to Baltimore and then back home to Minneapolis, were, in the evening after dinner. And so we were flying in the evening and we would arrive late at night. And, when we got out there, we had to go to a hotel. We didn't get to by the time we got our luggage, got our rental car, and got to the hotel, it was between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were very, very tired and it was very late. And you're unfamiliar with the place. I mean, I'm trying to figure out a rental car at, in the middle of the night, and I'm tired and it's dark. And then I'm trying to find a hotel that I've never been to before in a place I've never been. I don't recommend that. That's not a good idea. Coming home, we still have 2 hours to drive from the airport home. So to get home late, we got in at like 8:30, but that still meant, by the time we got our luggage and got to our car and got out of there, we still didn't get home until like 11 o'clock at night. And so you're getting to bed pretty late and you're tired. And so I don't recommend that. And I think going forward in the future, I'm going to look for flights that are earlier in the day. I really prefer, at the very least, getting to the destination before dinner time. So like when we get there, we can have dinner and like chill out for a little bit before we go to bed, instead of like, okay, we got to get to sleep right now because we're so tired and, we've been whatever. Coming up, I actually changed our plane tickets for our August trip out east because of that, but also I'm a little concerned. The federal transportation mask mandate is currently, at the time I'm filming this video, is currently set to expire on September 13th. And originally we were going to be flying to Boston September 22nd and returning on September 28th. And with the Delta variant and cases rising and things like that, I got kind of nervous. I do think they'll probably extend it, that President Biden will probably renew the federal transportation mask mandate, but I didn't want to take that chance and be in a situation where we would be on an airplane full of people with no masks on, or in airports with people with no masks on, and public transportation and things like that. And so I actually changed our trip for a few reasons. One was that I changed it to August so that we would definitely be flying before I knew the mask mandate could potentially expire. And also I didn't want the kids to be disrupted with school. And also I wanted to get earlier flights in the day. And also we're still like, it's very unlikely, but in the off chance that we could somehow still move out there before the end of the current summer, so that the kids could go to school out there instead of where we live now. So those are the reasons I changed our trip from September to August. Okay, the third thing that we did not like about this trip, or that was a disappointment, I guess, was our experience at the Outer Banks overall. And I talked about this in 2 other videos already, but overall the Outer Banks was just not what I was expecting. And I guess I had a different vision in my mind. Some of the things were kind of like what I was expecting, but a lot of it wasn't. Again, it takes a lot of time to drive there. It's a very out of the way place. And I guess the experience of visiting, to me, did not seem worth the effort to drive that far to get to it. And I'm sure there's other people who have a much more positive experience at the Outer Banks than we did, but just overall, I didn't like it. And again, the traffic was horrible at the Outer Banks. And also we had bad weather. It rained a lot of the time we were there. And a lot of things were closed We couldn't find any place to eat. It was just not what I pictured, and I didn't like it. I mean, I liked the beach and I liked the lighthouses, but as far as as an overall vacation destination, it's not something I would choose again in the future. And I'm 99% sure we'll never go back. Going back to one of my best things, which was the rental car, one of the things we did not like, and one of the 5 worst things about our trip, was something about the rental car. And that was it did not have enough trunk space. The trunk was too small. When you rent a car from Enterprise, and a lot of places will show, even I think on comparison sites like Expedia and stuff will show you this, it'll tell you how many passengers it fits and how many suitcases it fits. Well, they're not kidding. For this car, which was considered a mid-size, it said it held 4 passengers and 3 suitcases. And that's it. It would not hold more than 3. And we had our big suitcases. Oh, and if you go back to my video I made about the new suitcase we got and how we choose our luggage, this is another reason that I choose soft-sided luggage. You can squish it when you have to and cram it into a place, whether that be an overhead bin on an airplane or like this, a really small trunk. If we had had hard-sided luggage the same size as our luggage, we would not have been able to get it in that trunk. We would have had a major problem because the only way we were able to get the 3 suitcases into our trunk, which they just fit, just fit. We could barely get the trunk closed because the hinge on the sides would touch the suitcases, was we had to lay them in flat and then turn them up on their side. And we had to push them down to fit in the trunk and scoot them over. And it was when we had to pull the suitcases out, when we got to a hotel, I joked it was like giving birth. Because, you had to literally push down and pry the suitcase out. That's how tightly they fit in the trunk. And if we had not had soft-sided luggage that had a little give to it, we never would have been able to fit our suitcases in that trunk. And this was a major problem for Megan because she was basically the one that was getting the suitcases in and out of the trunk for us. It's a strange thing. Even though it's my ankle that is injured, I can't really lift and hold heavy things right now either. And she also doesn't want me to hurt my back. I would help her, prying them in and out of it, but she was the one that was doing the lifting. The fact that we stayed at 5 different hotels, this was no easy task, and it was kind of a big negative to it too. I hinted at this and said stay tuned for another video when I talked about how much we paid for everything on our trip. I'll link that right up here. I talked about how I changed to a compact SUV for our upcoming trip because of something. And this is the something. We need more trunk space. And strangely, a compact SUV was either the same price or less expensive than a full-size car, which says that it holds 4 suitcases. And I already own a compact SUV here at home. And so I already know that our suitcases very easily go in the back of that, no problem. So that's what I'm hoping we'll get something like what I have at home to more easily transport our luggage on our next trip. Just be aware of that. When it says how much luggage it fits on the car rental, it really means it. And be sure if you have more luggage than that, it's not going to fit. Okay, and then the 5th and final thing that we did not like or that we were disappointed about with our trip was dining. And I talked about this a little bit already too in another video. I can't remember which one. But we had a lot of trouble finding places to eat. One thing that really stuck out to us was the further south you got, the more fast food places there were. There's a lot more fast food places in the south. And I guess not just that there's more of them, but there's only fast food places. It was hard to find sit-down places to eat. It was hard to find family restaurants. In more populated areas, we could find things like Cracker Barrel and IHOP and things like that, but that's about it. It was really hard to find sit-down restaurants, table service restaurants where you sit down at a table and they serve you. It was very hard to find them. They were very few and far between. Now, The exception to this was like in cities. You know, we didn't have a problem in Washington, D.C. We didn't have a problem in Baltimore. And I think Williamsburg is probably okay because that's a pretty big tourist destination. But we had a heck of a time finding any place to eat in the Outer Banks. And I've talked about that in another video already. Just overall, we were pretty disappointed with the dining experience on this trip. And I've also talked about this, that if you want to have dining and eating and good restaurants be a major part of your travel experience, a road trip is not a good choice for that. You're just always going to be a little bit challenged in finding places to eat because you're always having to find a place to eat, for one thing, when you're on a road trip. And that I said that being in a big city or being on a cruise or being at like a more all-inclusive resort or something like Disney, those are better options if you want dining to be a really big part of your experience. And I do. Because like I've talked about before, I really hate cooking. And one of the things I most look forward to when I travel is not having to cook. So for me, it was disappointing not to have, you know, we didn't really have any meals that stand out in my mind as, oh, we had a really great meal. It was all kind of like hit or miss and a lot of fast food. So those are my 5 best and 5 worst things and the lessons we learned from them and what we're going to change so we don't have these same negatives on our future travels. I hope that that was helpful to you. Again, if you enjoy travel content like this and travel commentary tips and things like that, be sure that you're subscribed to my channel. Give me a thumbs up down below if you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching today. Have a great day, everyone, and safe travels.